When Stars Align Against Us. Story Outline Part 1. The Fall of Heaven's Gate Characters. Marcus Chen, Civilian Engineer. Zara Okafor, Botanist. Jackson Reeves, Security Officer. The surprise attack on the peaceful research station, Heaven's Gate. Marcus and Zara's first meeting during the evacuation. Their escape pod crashes on an uncharted moon. Part 2. Echoes in the Void. Characters. Nina Volkov, Communications Specialist. Theo Blackwood, former merchant pilot. Nina intercepts alien transmissions revealing their true plans. Theo reluctantly helps her steal a ship to warn other colonies. Growing tension and attraction as they navigate through enemy territory. Part 3. The Garden of Whispers. Characters. Elena Vasquez, xenobiologist. Kai Nakamura, Environmental Systems Engineer. Discovery of an ancient alien sanctuary with mysterious properties. Elena and Kai must work together to unlock its secrets. Their research reveals a potential weakness in the invaders. Technology. Part 4. Shattered Constellations. Characters. Raven Torres, pilot. Dmitry Kozlov, tactical analyst. The desperate attempt to coordinate scattered human survivors. Raven and Dmitry's dangerous mission to unite the resistance cells. A betrayal that forces them to rely only on each other. Part 5. Beyond the Event Horizon. Characters. All previous characters converge the final gambit using the alien sanctuary's power. Multiple romantic relationships reach their climax amid the chaos and unexpected resolution that changes everything. Part 1. The Fall of Heaven's Gate. The morning Marcus Chen discovered that love could bloom even as worlds burn began. Like any other aboard Heaven's Gate research station, he was 3 levels deep in the hydroponics bay, elbow deep in a malfunctioning atmospheric processor, when the first explosion rocked the station. The wrench slipped from his oil-slicked fingers, clattering against the metal grating as emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Marcus straightened, his engineer's mind already cataloging the vibrations through the hull. Not a system failure. Something external, something deliberate. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill, the announcement crackled through calm speakers, tinged with barely controlled panic. Marcus had spent 18 months on Heaven's Gate, a peaceful research outpost orbiting the garden world of Kepler 4b. Their mission was simple: study the planet's unique ecosystem, document its biodiversity, and prepare preliminary terraforming assessments. The most exciting thing that had happened in his tenure was when someone had accidentally introduced Earth coffee beans to the hydroponics lab, and they'd grown into something resembling actual coffee. Now, as he sprinted through corridors filled with screaming researchers and flashing warning lights, that peaceful existence felt like a fever dream. The main observation deck was chaos. Through the massive transparistile windows, Marcus could see them sleek, predatory vessels emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. Their hulls were dark as obsidian, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and they moved with an organic fluidity that made his stomach clench. "My God," whispered someone beside him. "They're beautiful." Marcus turned to see a woman he'd noticed before but never spoken to. Dr. Zara Okafor, the xenobotanist who spent most of her time in the sealed research labs. Her dark skin gleamed with perspiration, and her usually perfectly arranged braids were disheveled from running. Even in the midst of terror, she was striking, beautiful, and about to kill us all, Marcus replied, grabbing her arm as another explosion sent the deck lurching. "We need to get to the escape pods." Zara pulled back, her brown eyes fierce with determination. "Not without my samples. 3 years of research won't matter if you're dead," Marcus interrupted. But he was already calculating routes through the station. If they were quick, if they were lucky, the alien vessels opened fire in earnest then, their weapons carving through Heaven's Gate's hull like it was made of paper. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated, sending researchers tumbling across the deck. Through the viewport, Marcus watched as one of the research labs, the one where Zara worked, blossomed into a flower of flame and scattered debris. Zara's hand found his, her fingers surprisingly strong. "Too late," she said simply, but he caught the tremor in her voice. They ran together through corridors that groaned and buckled around them. The station's superstructure was failing, emergency bulkheads slamming shut to contain atmosphere leaks. Marcus's engineering knowledge served them well. guiding them through maintenance passages and emergency routes that most researchers didn't know existed. Why didn't we see them coming? Zara panted as they climbed through a Jeffries tube, the space barely wide enough for one person. Cloaking technology, Marcus replied, though he'd never seen anything like those ships in any technical manual. Or they were hiding behind the moon's sensor shadow. No, Zara said with certainty. Those aren't built ships. Did you see how they moved? Organic curves, adaptive positioning. They're grown, not manufactured. Marcus paused in his climbing, looking back at her, even fleeing for their lives. Her scientific mind was working, analyzing. You think they're biological, bioengineered, maybe, or a fusion of organic and technological elements we can't understand. Another explosion rocked the station, and she grimaced. Academic questions for another time. They reached the escape pod bay to find it in chaos. Researchers and station personnel fought to reach the limited number of pods, while Security Chief Jackson Reeves tried to maintain order. Marcus had worked with Jackson before, a steady man in his 40s. Military background, the kind of person you wanted in a crisis. Chen, Jackson called out when he spotted them. Thank God. I need an engineer. Half these pods won't launch some kind of electromagnetic interference from those ships. Marcus pushed through the crowd to the pod control panels. The interference pattern was unlike anything he'd seen, almost rhythmic, as if the alien vessels were deliberately jamming their escape systems. He could work around it, but it would take time they didn't have. I can get them operational, he told Jackson, but someone needs to manually override the launch sequence from each pod. I'll do it, Zara volunteered immediately. Jackson shook his head. Too dangerous. If the bay depressurizes while you're moving between pods, then we all die anyway. Zara cut him off. Marcus, what do you need me to do? As Marcus worked frantically at the control panel, rewiring circuits and bypassing alien interference, he found himself acutely aware of Zara moving through the pod bay. She'd shed her lab coat somewhere, revealing a form-fitting jumpsuit that emphasized her athletic build. Her movements were graceful, efficient, each action deliberate despite the chaos around them. Pod 7 is ready, she called out, and a group of researchers piled in. Marcus triggered the launch sequence, watching through the bay's observation windows as the small craft shot away from the dying station. They worked in perfect synchronization, Marcus's engineering expertise complementing Zara's quick thinking and physical courage. Pod after pod launched successfully, carrying Heaven's Gate's personnel to safety or at least away from immediate destruction. That's the last of them, Jackson announced as the final pod cleared the bay. Except for us. Marcus looked up from the control panel to see 3 pods remaining, but his readings showed only one was still operational. The electromagnetic interference was intensifying, and the station's superstructure was failing rapidly. The 3 of us, 1 pod. Zara observed calmly. Cozy, it's rated for emergency evacuation, Jackson said, but Marcus could hear the doubt in his voice. We'll fit. They barely did. The escape pod was designed for 2 people in emergency conditions, with minimal life support and basic navigation. With 3 adults crammed into the space, every movement required coordination. Marcus found himself pressed against Zara's side, acutely aware of her warmth, the subtle scent of her hair despite the recycled air. Everyone secure? Jackson asked from the pilot's position. At their acknowledgement, he triggered the launch. The pod shot away from Heaven's Gate just as the station's fusion reactor containment finally failed. The explosion lit up local space like a newborn star, the shockwave catching their pod and sending it tumbling through the void. Alarms screamed as they spun helplessly, the artificial gravity failing. Marcus felt Zara's hand find his in the chaos, her grip anchoring him as much as the safety restraints. Through the small viewport, he caught glimpses of the alien vessels moving away from the destruction, their dark hulls already fading back into invisibility. Navigation shot, Jackson reported, fighting to regain control. And I'm reading massive gravitational interference. There's something large nearby. Marcus checked his instruments. What few were still functional. It's the moon, he realized. We're caught in its gravity well. The irony wasn't lost on him. Kepler 440b's moon was supposed to be their next research target, a tidally locked world with potential water deposits on its dark side. Now it was going to be their final destination, whether they survived the landing or not. "Can we land safely?" Zara asked, though she probably already knew the answer from their expressions. "Define safely," Jackson muttered, working the manual controls as they descended through the moon's thin atmosphere. The surface rushed up to meet them, ancient impact craters and twisted mineral formations in the eternal twilight of the moon's Terminator line. Jackson picked what looked like the softest landing site available. Part 2. Echoes in the Void. Nina Volkov had always been good at listening to things she wasn't supposed to hear. As the primary communications specialist aboard the merchant vessel Starfall, she'd intercepted everything from pirates planning raids to corporate executives arranging illegal trade deals. But she'd never heard anything like the transmissions flooding the emergency frequencies tonight. The Starfall hung in the shadow of Titan's Reach asteroid field, officially running, silent for routine maintenance. In reality, Captain Morris was meeting with smugglers to offload contraband and medical supplies, the kind of morally gray transaction that kept independent merchants afloat in the outer colonies. Nina didn't mind, the pay was good, and Morris asked few questions about her past. What she minded was the alien voices crackling through her modified receiver array. Tertiary colonies eliminated, harvesting protocols initiated, genetic material secured. The translation matrix she'd cobbled together from academic linguistics programs was crude, but functional enough. These weren't random raiders or pirates. The cold efficiency in those inhuman voices spoke of something far worse: systematic extermination. Nina's fingers flew across her console, adjusting frequencies and amplifying weak signals. Her station was crammed into what had once been a storage compartment, banks of jury-rigged equipment humming around her like electronic insects. Most merchant vessels made do with standard comm gear, but Nina had spent 2 years and most of her savings building something more sophisticated. Now she was grateful for her paranoia. Human settlements offer minimal resistance. Proceed to Phase 2. Her blood turned to ice. She'd grown up on Kepler Station, one of the Outer Rim colonies these things were discussing like grocery lists. Her sister Katya still lived there with her 2 children. Nina's hands shook as she tried to isolate the transmission source. Multiple ships, moving in coordinated patterns toward inhabited systems. The Starfall's bulkheads suddenly shuddered, and Nina heard Captain Morris's voice over the intercom. "All hands, prepare for emergency departure. We've got company." Nina switched to the ship's external sensors, her heart sinking. 3 sleek vessels had materialized from what appeared to be empty space, their dark hulls absorbing the asteroid field's reflected light. They moved with predatory grace, positioning themselves to cut off the Starfall's escape routes. "Captain," she called through the comm, "I'm reading massive electromagnetic signatures from those ships. They're jamming our FTL drive. Can you break through?" Morris's voice was tight with controlled fear. Nina was already working, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards simultaneously. "Negative. The interference pattern is too sophisticated. It's like they know our technology better than we do." Through her headset, she heard the alien transmissions shifting frequency, becoming clearer. Her improvised translation matrix struggled with the concepts. "Vessel contains communication specialist, priority capture, valuable for intelligence gathering." They were talking about her. Somehow, these aliens had detected her surveillance of their transmissions and identified her as a threat or an asset. "Captain, we need to evacuate," Nina said, already shutting down her equipment and grabbing the portable drives containing her intercepts. "They're specifically targeting this ship." The Starfall lurched as energy beams raked across her hull. Through the ship's internal cameras, Nina could see crew members scrambling for the escape pods. The merchant vessel wasn't built for combat against these alien ships. They had minutes at best. Nina was sealing her data drives in a radiation-proof case when someone burst into her compartment. She spun around, defensive software crackling to life on her remaining active screens, then relaxed slightly when she recognized the intruder. Theo Blackwood, the Starfall's cargo handler and occasional pilot, in his early 30s, with prematurely silver hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of too many years in dangerous places. Nina had always found him attractive in a roguish way, though their interactions had been limited to professional necessity and the occasional shared meal in the ship's cramped galley. "The captain sent me to get you," Theo said, already moving to help her gather equipment. "Pods are launching into minutes." "There's no time," Nina replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "They're jamming everything the pods won't get far enough away before those ships destroy them." Theo paused, his gray eyes searching her face. "You have a better idea." Nina looked at her equipment, then at the man who'd just risked his life to come find her. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, she made a decision that would change everything. "There's a courier ship in Bay 7, she said quickly. "Independent registry, modified engines. If we can reach it before another impact sent them both stumbling." The Starfall's hull was failing, atmosphere bleeding into space through dozens of microfractures. "Bay 7's on the other side of the ship," Theo pointed out, but he was already checking his sidearm and emergency gear. "Through sections that might be exposed to vacuum. Better than certain death here." Nina slung her equipment pack over her shoulder. The weight of the data drives a constant reminder of what was at stake. "Those transmissions I intercepted this isn't random. They're systematically eliminating human colonies." Theo's expression darkened. "All of them, every inhabited system in this sector." Nina sealed her emergency suit's collar, checking the integrity readings. "Someone needs to warn the core worlds." They made their way through the dying ship, the corridor lights flickering erratically as power systems failed. The Starfall had been Nina's home for 8 months, and seeing it torn apart by incomprehensible weapons made something cold and angry settle in her chest. "Why didn't we see them coming?" Theo asked as they climbed through a maintenance shaft, the hull groaning ominously around them. "They were cloaked, but not in any way our sensors could detect," Nina replied, her engineer's training evident in her analysis. "I think they exist partially outside normal spacetime, folded space technology, maybe. Or something more exotic." "You mean they're using science we don't understand?" "I mean they're using science we can't understand yet." Nina paused at an intersection, checking her readings. "The transmission patterns suggest their technology is at least partially organic. Living ships. Possibly they reached Bay 7 to find the courier ship exactly where Nina remembered it, a sleek, predatory-looking vessel that screamed speed and maneuverability. More importantly, its engine signatures suggested modifications that might just be exotic enough to slip past alien jamming." "You know how to fly this thing?" Theo asked as they sealed themselves into the cockpit. "I know how to fly anything with engines," Nina replied, her hands already moving over the unfamiliar controls. "The question is whether it'll run long enough to matter." The ship's engines spun up with a satisfying hum that suggested quality modifications. Through the bay's observation windows, they could see the Starfall's final moments hull sections peeling away like flower petals, internal explosions creating momentary stars in the darkness. "Farewell, old girl," Theo murmured, then looked at Nina. "Ready when you are." The bay doors opened, and Nina fired the engines. The courier ship shot into space like a bullet, its modified drive system screaming protest at the sudden acceleration. Behind them, the alien vessels turned with fluid grace, energy beams reaching out like deadly fingers. "They're tracking us," Theo reported from the co-pilot station. 3 ships breaking off pursuit of the escape pods. Nina pushed the courier ship harder, its frame shuddering as they approached the edge of its design parameters. The asteroid field provided some cover, massive rocks deflecting the alien weapons, but their pursuers were gaining ground. "There," Nina said, pointing to a cluster of larger asteroids. "If I can thread us through that formation, we might lose them in the sensor shadows." "Might, definitely will," Nina corrected, though her knuckles were white on the controls. "I hope." The flight through the asteroid field was a nightmare of split-second timing and impossible angles. The courier ship's agility was the only thing keeping them alive as energy beams turned ancient rocks into superheated plasma. Theo found himself watching Nina with growing admiration. Her control of the ship was instinctive, artistic, like she was dancing with the laws of physics. "You're incredible," he said without thinking. Nina glanced at him, a slight smile touching her lips despite the danger. Save the compliments until we're not about to die. They emerged from the asteroid field into open space. The alien ships momentarily lost in the maze of rock and metal. Nina immediately began charging the FTL drive, praying the modifications would be enough to punch through whatever jamming field the aliens projected. FTL in 30 seconds, she announced, then frowned at her readings. Theo, we have a problem. Besides the alien death ships, the transmission I intercepted mentioned specific targets. Kepler Station is on their list. Nina's voice was carefully controlled, but Theo caught the tremor underneath. My sister and her children are there. Theo studied the navigation display, then looked at Nina's profile as she worked. He'd known her for months, but this was the first time he'd seen past her professional facade to the woman. Underneath, brilliant, determined, and clearly terrified for her family. How long until they reach Kepler? He asked, based. Elena Vasquez had never believed in destiny until she found herself standing at the edge of an impossible garden, watching alien flowers bloom in patterns that hurt to perceive directly. The research vessel Meridian had been fleeing the destruction of the Arcturus colony for 3 days when their damaged FTL drive finally gave out, stranding them in an uncharted system that shouldn't have existed. Gravitational readings are off the charts, Kai Nakamura reported from the Environmental Systems Station, his usually calm voice tinged with wonder. That moon isn't just tidally locked, it's artificially stabilized. Someone built this place. Elena moved closer to the observation deck's main viewport, her xenobiologist training warring with simple human awe. The moon's surface was a patchwork of impossible ecosystems, crystalline forests that sang in harmonious frequencies, vast gardens where plants moved with deliberate purpose, and at the center of it all, a structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than her eyes could process. Whoever built it, they've been gone a long time, she murmured, studying the energy readings scrolling across her tablet. But their garden is still tending itself. The Meridian limped into orbit around the mysterious moon, her engines barely functional after their narrow escape from the alien harvesters. Elena had watched from the science deck as those dark ships systematically dismantled Arcturus colony, their biomechanical weapons carving through the settlement's defenses. Like they were made of paper, only a lucky solar flare had masked the Meridian's escape vector, buying them enough time to jump before the harvesters could pursue. Now, as the ship's environmental engineer worked frantically to keep their life support systems operational, Elena found herself drawn to the impossible world below. Something about the organized patterns of growth, the way different ecosystems blended seamlessly into one another, spoke to her on a fundamental level. Dr. Vasquez, Captain Reynolds called from the bridge. We need options. Life support is failing, and we're damaged to attempt another FTL jump. Elena looked at Kai, who was bent over his console, sweat beading on his dark skin as he tried to coax more life from their dying systems. She'd worked with him before, brilliant, methodical, with an intuitive understanding of how different technologies could be integrated. If anyone could keep them alive long enough to find a solution, it would be him. The moon has a breathable atmosphere, she reported. Oxygen levels are actually higher than Earth normal, and I'm not detecting any obvious toxins. Any signs of whoever built those structures? Reynolds asked. Elena exchanged glances with Kai. They'd both seen the energy readings, the impossible architecture that suggested technology far beyond human understanding. Negative, Captain, but the entire ecosystem appears to be artificially maintained. Whoever they were, they left behind some kind of automated system. A pause, then, recommendations? We need to go down there, Elena said before she could second-guess herself. Not just for survival, for answers. If we can understand how their technology works, we might find a way to defend against the harvesters. 2 hours later, Elena found herself in a landing shuttle with Kai and 3 other crew members, descending toward the alien garden. The shuttle's sensors were going crazy, picking up energy signatures that defied classification and biological readings that suggested life forms unlike anything in their databases. Landing zone clear, Kai reported as they touched down in a Clearing surrounded by trees that seemed to be made of living crystal. Atmosphere checks out, but the electromagnetic readings are off the scale. Elena was the first out of the shuttle, her breath catching as she got her first close look at the alien ecosystem. The crystal trees chimed softly in the breeze, their faceted surfaces refracting sunlight into rainbow patterns that danced across the forest floor. Beneath her feet, the ground felt spongy, organic, but when she knelt to examine it more closely, she realized it wasn't soil at all. It was some kind of living membrane. Warm to the touch and faintly luminescent. "Elena," Kai called softly. From beside the shuttle, "You need to see this." She turned to find him staring at his environmental readings, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "What is it?" "The air composition is changing," he said slowly, not dramatically, but in response to our presence. "It's like the atmosphere is adapting to optimize our comfort and health." Elena looked around the clearing with new eyes, noting how the trees seemed to lean slightly inward, creating a natural shelter from the wind. Even the temperature felt perfect, not too warm, not too cold. Exactly what a human would find comfortable. "It's welcoming us," she breathed. "The entire ecosystem is designed to be hospitable to visitors." They spent the next several hours exploring the immediate area, cataloging the impossible flora and fauna they encountered. Elena documented plants that seemed to photosynthesize starlight, insects that existed partially in subspace, and flowers that bloomed in mathematical sequences that suggested a deep understanding of universal constants. But it was Kai who made the most significant discovery. "Elena, come here." He called from the edge of a grove where the crystal trees gave way to something that looked almost like earth roses. If roses could exist in 17 different colors simultaneously. "Look at this." She joined him at what appeared to be a control interface grown directly from the living ground, organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. When Kai placed his hand on the central node, symbols flowed across its surface in languages that predated human civilization. "It's responding to touch," he said wonderingly. "But more than that, I think it's trying to communicate." Elena moved closer, acutely aware of Kai's proximity as they studied the alien interface together. They'd worked on the same research team for 2 years, but always in the controlled environment of a starship laboratory. Here, surrounded by impossible beauty and ancient mystery, she found herself noticing things she'd previously ignored. The way concentration furrowed his brow, the careful precision of his movements, the quiet intensity he brought to every problem. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the interface. When she placed her palm alongside his on the warm, living surface, the symbols suddenly snapped into focus. Not language exactly, but concepts flowing directly into her mind. "Welcome, sanctuary. Preparation, synthesis, warning. It's a repository," she gasped, pulling her hand back. "A library of some kind. The civilization that built this place. They left behind everything they learned." Kai was staring at her with concern. "Are you all right?" "Your pupils dilated when you touched it." Elena realized she was trembling, overwhelmed by the brief contact with an intelligence that spanned geological ages. "I'm fine," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "But Kai, the information in there could change everything, or kill us," he pointed out pragmatically. "We don't know what kind of safeguards they built into their systems." "We don't have a choice," Elena replied, looking back toward where their shuttle sat in the crystal grove. Through the trees, she could see the meridian in orbit, its hull scarred and atmosphere bleeding slowly into space. "Our ship is dying, and those harvesters will find us eventually. This might be our only chance to find something that can help humanity survive." Kai studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Together then. If we're going to risk neural integration with alien technology, we do it as a team." They placed their hands on the interface simultaneously, and the world exploded into meaning. Elena found herself floating in a vast space filled with the accumulated knowledge of a species that had transcended physical existence eons ago. They called themselves the Gardeners, and they had spent millions of years cultivating life throughout the galaxy, nurturing civilizations and preparing them for what they termed the Great Convergence. The harvesters, she learned with growing horror, were not invaders at all. They were the Gardeners' final creation. designed to collect the mature fruits of cultivation. When the time came for the next phase of galactic evolution, humanity wasn't being destroyed. They were being harvested for integration into something larger, something the gardeners believed was the natural progression of all intelligent life. But the gardeners had made a critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that all species would welcome transcendence, that the opportunity to become part of a galactic consciousness would be embraced by every civilization that achieved sufficient complexity. They had not anticipated resistance. Their beautiful, Kai's voice reached her across the neural link, filled with wonder and sadness. But they're completely alien. They can't understand why we want to remain individuals, why we value our separate existence. Elena felt his presence in the shared space, warm and familiar and utterly human in contrast to the vast, cold intelligence that surrounded them. Through the gardener's records, she saw the fate of dozens of species, all transformed, integrated, their individual consciousness absorbed into the collective. In the name of a higher purpose they couldn't refuse. There has to be another way, she insisted, diving deeper into the repository's data streams. Some alternative they didn't consider. That's when she founded a single file buried deep in the gardener's archives, marked with symbols that translated roughly as aberrant development and containment protocol. Raven Torres had been flying through debris fields and dodging pirates for most of her adult life, but she'd never attempted anything as insane as coordinating a resistance movement, scattered across 17 star systems while being hunted by ships that could exist outside normal spacetime. The fact that she was doing it alongside Dmitry Kozlov, a man whose tactical brilliance was matched only by his ability to drive her absolutely crazy, just added another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. The Helix colony went dark 6 hours ago, Dmitry reported from the co-pilot's seat of their stolen courier ship, his Russian accent more pronounced when he was stressed. That makes 8 settlements lost in the past 48 hours. Raven adjusted their heading toward the Meridian cluster, where hopefully Elena Vasquez and her team were still alive with the alien technology they'd discovered. Her hands moved automatically over the flight controls, muscle memory taking over while her mind processed the tactical situation. That seemed to grow more hopeless by the hour. Any word from Nina's group? She asked, though she already knew the answer from Dmitry's expression. Nina and Theo managed to evacuate Kepler Station, but they lost half the survivors to harvester ships during the extraction. Dmitry said quietly, "They're running silent somewhere in the outer rim, trying to reach the core worlds." Raven had met Nina Volkov only twice, but she'd been impressed by the communications specialist's ability to pull intelligence from enemy transmissions. If anyone could get word to Earth about the true scale of the harvester threat, it would be Nina. The question was whether there would be anyone left to warn by the time she got there. "What about Marcus and his people?" Raven asked, referring to the engineer who'd managed to organize survivors from Heaven's Gate Station. "Last contact was 18 hours ago," Dmitry replied, consulting his notes. "They were attempting to reach the industrial complex at Titan's heart. If they succeeded, Marcus thinks he can modify some of the heavy manufacturing equipment to build weapons. That might actually hurt the harvesters." Raven nodded, though privately she wondered if conventional weapons would make any difference against enemies who could fold space around their ships like origami. She'd seen the harvester vessels in action during the attack on New Geneva, dark, organic shapes that moved through three-dimensional space as if it were merely a suggestion, rather than a fundamental law of physics. "Contact coming in," Dmitry announced, his fingers dancing over the communications console. "It's Elena. She's alive." The view screen flickered to life, revealing Elena Vasquez's dirt-streaked face against a background of impossible alien architecture. Beside her stood Kai Nakamura, the environmental engineer, both of them looking exhausted, but somehow more alive than Raven had ever seen them. "Raven." "Thank God," Elena said, relief evident in her voice. "We found something. The gardener's repository. It contains technical specifications for technology that could help us fight back." "What kind of technology?" Dmitry asked, leaning forward intently. "Dimensional displacement fields," Kai answered, his engineer's excitement barely contained. The ability to hide entire star systems from the Harvester's perception. We've located a facility where the original builders stored prototype equipment. Raven felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. Where? The Obsidian Nebula, Elena replied. Coordinates are in the data packet we're transmitting now. But Raven, there's something else. The Harvesters aren't just randomly attacking there, following a specific pattern, harvesting genetic material according to some kind of galactic plan that's been in motion for millions of years. How long do we have? Raven asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Based on their current progression, Dmitri calculated. Studying the tactical data Elena had provided, they'll reach the core worlds within 72 hours. After that, he didn't need to finish. After that, humanity would cease to exist as an independent species, absorbed into whatever collective consciousness the Harvesters served. We're uploading everything we found to your ship's database, Elena continued. The facility in the Obsidian Nebula is our best hope, but it's heavily defended by automated systems. You'll need a team. I'll start making contacts, Raven decided. Marcus from Heaven's Gate, Nina if we can reach her. Maybe some of the military survivors from the outer colonies, Raven. Elena's voice carried a warning. The repository showed us something else. The Harvesters have been monitoring our communications, learning our strategies. Whoever you bring, make sure you trust them completely. The transmission ended, leaving Raven and Dmitri alone in the courier ship's cramped cockpit. Outside the viewports, the stars looked deceptively peaceful, giving no hint of the systematic destruction taking place across human space. 72 hours, Raven murmured, setting course for the rendezvous point where they hoped to gather. The scattered resistance cells, not much time to save the entire human race. Plenty of time for you to get us all killed with one of your insane flying stunts, Dmitri replied. But there was warmth in his voice that belied the criticism. Raven shot him a sideways look. They'd been partners for 6 months now ever since she'd rescued him from a Harvester attack on the research station, where he'd been working as a tactical consultant. Their working relationship had been professional, efficient, and absolutely maddening. Dmitri's careful planning, constantly clashing with her instinctive approach to crisis management. My flying has kept us alive this long, she pointed out. Your flying nearly got us vaporized over Kepler Station, Dmitri countered. And again at New Geneva. And don't get me started on that asteroid field near. Okay, Raven interrupted. But she was smiling despite the desperate circumstances. I get the point. But admit it, you've never been bored working with me. Dmitri was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying her profile as she piloted them through the darkness between stars. No, he said finally, never bored. There was something in his tone that made Raven glance at him again. A subtle shift in the atmosphere between them. That had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. For 6 months, they'd maintained careful professional boundaries, partners in survival rather than anything more personal. But somewhere between watching entire worlds burn and coordinating desperate rescue missions, those boundaries had begun to blur. Dmitri, she began, then stopped as proximity alarms chimed. From the navigation console, 3 ships approaching, Dmitri reported, instantly back in tactical mode. Configuration unknown, but they're moving too smoothly to be human vessels. Raven's hands tightened on the controls as their pursuers materialized on the main screen. Sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Harvester ships, somehow tracking them despite their modified engines and stealth capabilities. They found us, she breathed, already plotting evasive maneuvers. How did they find us? Unknown, Dmitri replied grimly, his fingers flying over the weapons console. Our stealth systems should be undetectable to their sensors. The first energy beam missed their starboard hull by meters, superheating the space around them. Raven threw the courier ship into a spiraling dive toward a nearby asteroid field, hoping the complex gravitational environment would confuse their pursuers' targeting systems. Raven, Dmitri said urgently, studying his sensor readings. I'm detecting human life signs aboard one of those Harvester ships. What? Raven's concentration wavered for a crucial second, nearly allowing another energy beam to find its target. Biosignatures. Consistent with human physiology, Dmitri confirmed. But the neural activity patterns are wrong, suppressed somehow. A horrible realization dawned on Raven as she remembered Elena's warnings about the harvesters. True purpose. They weren't just destroying human settlements, they were converting the survivors, turning them into tools for hunting down the remaining free populations. They're using our people against us, she said quietly. Modified, controlled, Dmitri agreed, but still fundamentally human, which means they know how we think, how we fly, what tactical decisions we're likely to make. Raven's voice was tight with suppressed anger. No wonder they found us. The chase continued. Through the asteroid field, a deadly game of three-dimensional chess played at relativistic speeds. Raven's piloting skills kept them alive, but barely. The harvester ships moved within human precision, their converted human crews providing insights into their quarry's behavior patterns. I have an idea, Dmitri said suddenly, but you're not going to like it. At this point, I'll try anything, Raven replied, diving between the massive asteroids as energy beams carved glowing furrows in the ancient rock. The converted humans, they're still human enough to be fooled by human psychology. Dmitri was already working at his console, modifying their ship's communication array. If I can create the right kind of false signal, make them think we're already dead. Do it, Raven ordered, pulling the ship into a sharp climb that brought them dangerously close to one of the pursuing vessels. Dmitri triggered his modified signal just as Raven cut all power to their engines, letting momentum carry them into the shadow of a large asteroid. To external sensors, it would look like they'd crashed, their ship's reactor going critical and vaporizing in a brief, bright flare. They held their breath as the obsidian nebula hung in space like a bruise against the stars. Its dark matter clouds shot through with veins of exotic energy that made sensor readings flicker and dance. Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the salvage vessel, Resilience, watching as their small fleet approached the hidden facility that might be humanity's last hope. Energy readings are off the charts, Nina Volkov reported from her jury-rigged communications station. The specialist had arrived just hours earlier with Theo Blackwood and a ship full of Kepler Station refugees, her eyes bright with exhaustion and determination. Whatever's in there, it's been dormant for millennia, but it's still functional. Elena felt Kai's presence beside her, their neural link from the gardener's repository allowing them to share observations without words. The facility ahead of them was vast, a crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its architecture following geometric principles that hurt to look at directly. The Veil Builder's last gift to the galaxy, Marcus Chen observed, joining them at the viewport. The engineer's makeshift prosthetic arm cobbled together from salvaged components. After their escape from Heaven's Gate, clicked softly as he gestured toward the alien construct. Question is, can we figure out how to use it in time? Through the neural link. Elena felt Kai's anxiety spike as new sensor data flooded their shared consciousness. The harvester fleet pursuing them was less than 12 hours away, their dark ships moving through space with the inexorable patience of cosmic forces. Behind them, the core worlds of human civilization waited unknowingly for extinction. Dmitri's tactical analysis suggests we have maybe 6 hours to activate whatever defensive systems this place contains, Raven Torres announced as she stepped onto the observation deck, her pilot's jumpsuit still stained with sweat from their harrowing escape through the nebula's gravitational anomalies. After that, we're trapped here with no way out. Elena turned to study the faces around her, the survivors, who had become something more than just refugees in the weeks since the harvester attacks began. Nina's brilliant mind working constantly to decode alien transmissions, Theo's steady reliability anchoring those around him, Marcus's engineering genius turning scrap into miracles, Raven's impossible flying keeping them all alive, and Dmitri's tactical expertise finding patterns in chaos. And Kai, whose consciousness touched hers across dimensions of shared experience and growing love. Then we don't waste time, Elena decided. Kai and I will take a team to the facilities. Core, the repository gave us enough knowledge to interface with their systems. but we'll need backup teams working on the peripheral systems. I'll take Nina and analyze their communication networks, Marcus volunteered. If we can understand how they coordinated their dimensional displacement technology, maybe we can adapt it to protect more than just this system. Theo and I can work on the power distribution systems, Raven added, glancing at the former merchant pilot with an expression that had grown increasingly warm over their shared adventures. Someone needs to make sure we don't accidentally blow ourselves up when we activate ancient alien technology, and I'll coordinate defensive positions. Dmitri concluded, if the harvesters arrive before we're ready, we'll need to buy time somehow. 2 hours later, Elena found herself deep within the Veil Builders facility, surrounded by technology that made the gardener's repository look primitive by comparison. The walls themselves were alive with flowing patterns of energy, responding to her presence with subtle shifts in luminosity and temperature. It's beautiful, Kai whispered beside her, his voice filled with the same awe she felt. The neural link they shared amplified their wonder, creating a feedback loop of shared experience that made the alien architecture seem almost familiar. And incredibly complex, Elena added, studying the interface they'd found at the facilities. Heart, unlike the organic controls of the gardener's repository. This was pure crystalline mathematics, geometric forms that shifted and recombined in patterns that suggested the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. Through their comlinks, they could hear the other teams making progress throughout the facility. Nina's excited voice reporting breakthrough after breakthrough in the communication systems. Marcus cursing creatively as he worked to understand power conduits that operated on principles human science had never discovered. Raven and Theo's quiet collaboration as they mapped energy flow patterns that could power entire star systems. Elena, Kai said suddenly, his hand finding hers as they stood before the central interface. Whatever happens next, I need you to know. I know, she replied, squeezing his fingers gently. I feel it too, the link we forged in the repository. It's not just neural synchronization anymore. It's love, pure and simple. Kai's smile was brilliant even in the strange light of the alien chamber. When this is over, when we've saved humanity from the harvesters, I want to explore what we've found together, not just the technology, but us. This connection we share. Elena leaned closer, their faces inches apart in the crystalline glow. When this is over, she agreed, then pressed her lips to his in a kiss that seemed to resonate through the facility's energy fields, causing the walls to pulse with sympathetic harmonics. Their moment was interrupted by Dmitri's urgent voice. Over the comm system, contact. Multiple harvester ships dropping out of FTL at the nebula's edge. We have maybe 30 minutes before they reach us. Elena and Kai exchanged glances, then moved as one toward the central interface. The knowledge from the gardener's repository flowed between them through their neural link, combined with their growing understanding of Veil Builder technology. Together, Elena said, placing her hands on the crystalline surface. Together, Kai agreed, his palms joining hers. The interface responded instantly, flooding their shared consciousness with information that threatened to overwhelm their human minds. The Veil Builders hadn't just created dimensional displacement technology, they had discovered how to manipulate the fundamental constants of reality itself, creating pocket universes where different physical laws could apply. Welcome, inheritors. A voice spoke directly into their minds, ancient beyond measure, but somehow warm with approval. You have shown courage in the face of extinction, wisdom in the face of the unknown, and love in the face of despair. These are the qualities we hope to nurture across the galaxy. You're still here, Elena gasped, struggling to maintain her individual consciousness within the vast intelligence that touched theirs. We transcended physical existence long ago, but we left guardians in our technologies, waiting for species mature enough to inherit our legacy. The gardeners were our children, but they lost sight of the value of individual consciousness. The harvesters are their mistake tools of transcendence, become instruments of force. Through the facility's sensors, Elena could see the harvester fleet approaching through the nebula, their dark ships moving with predatory grace. On the command frequency, she heard Dmitri coordinating their pathetic defenses, a handful of damaged ships against an armada designed to harvest entire civilizations. How do we stop them? Kai asked through their shared link. You don't stop them. The Veil Builder consciousness replied, you offer them a choice they have never been given. The power of this facility can either hide humanity from the harvesters forever, or it can create a new paradigm, a synthesis that preserves individual consciousness within collective. The purpose, Elena understood with sudden clarity. The harvesters weren't evil. They were following programming created by the gardener's mistaken belief that forced transcendence was the only path to galactic harmony. But the Veil Builders had discovered another way, a merger that preserved the essence of what made each species unique. Nina, Elena called over the calm system. I need you to broadcast a message on all harvester frequencies, full spectrum, every communication channel they use. What message? Nina's voice crackled back, tense with concentration as she worked. Tell them we're offering them what the gardeners never could, the chance to choose their own path to transcendence. The harvester fleet was now visible through the facility's viewports, their ships arranging themselves in perfect attack formation. But instead of opening fire immediately, they seemed to hesitate, their formation faltering as Nina's message reached them through the central interface. Elena felt the facility's defensive systems coming online, not weapons, but something far more sophisticated. Reality itself began to shift around them, dimensional barriers forming that could hide entire star systems from hostile forces. But that wasn't what Elena wanted. Kai, help me, she said, pouring her will into the interface, not hiding transformation. Show them what cooperation looks like instead of conquest. Their combined consciousness reached out through the facility's systems, touching the minds of the harvester crews. Elena felt the shock of contact with intelligences that had been modified, programmed, their individual thoughts suppressed in service to collective purpose. But underneath the programming, the original consciousness remained human minds trapped within alien directives, crying out for freedom they had forgotten how to seek. We see you, Elena whispered across the connection. You're still human. You still have the right to choose. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the harvester fleet, Crewsby,